Well, good afternoon. I'm Ellen McSherry. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the NJCPA, and welcome to IssuesWatch. So today I'm joined by three esteemed colleagues. I have Ralph Thomas, who you've already met, the CEO and Executive Director of the NJCPA. Next to Ralph is Sarah Krom. Sarah is the immediate past president of the NJCPA and managing partner at SKC and Company. Yep. I got it right finally, CPAs. And our new president, Kyle Sell from Deloitte. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's presentation is a little bit different than our typical Issues Watch. We are broadcasting live from the NJCPA convention, as well as I think we have over 200 people online right now watching. If you have someone back home who would be interested in seeing Issues Watch, we are going to be rebroadcasting this event on June 18th and June 20th, so please pass that on. If you have any questions at all at any point, the instructions for submitting them are now being displayed on the screen, and we will try to address as many questions as we can during the live presentation. Questions submitted during the replay will be answered within 24 hours. During today's program, we'll be covering many New Jersey issues, including the looming state budget, the latest on cannabis, Sarah,
always my topic,
updates on CPE regulations, and more. We'll also discuss a few national issues and then provide updates on some key NJCPA programs, services, and initiatives. So I'm going to start off with Ralph. We're going to talk about the New Jersey budget. For those of you who don't know, Ralph's had the pleasure and the opportunity to serve on the Path to Progress committee this past year. So I know he's going to be talking a little bit about that, but he's intimately knowledgeable of what we think is going to go on with the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Ralph.
Well, thank you, Ellen. First of all, I hope that we will get a budget passed so we won't have a shutdown, so that everyone can enjoy the 4th of July weekend and the beaches and whatnot. But there's a big question mark about that because of the budget that was introduced by Governor Murphy back in March. It's a $38.6 billion budget, which is about a 1.7% increase over the prior year's budget. It includes a couple of big items, a $1.1 billion in cost savings, $3.8 billion pension payment, and a $1.2 billion surplus. And that's one of the big things and reasons that New Jersey has had some of its credit downgrades is because of the surplus, not having a sufficient surplus. And by a sufficient surplus, I mean a surplus that can be predicted each year. We've been successful at finding one-time type of situations to create a surplus, and that's caused a lot of concern for the regulators and the folks that provide that have been downgrading New Jersey in terms of that. And that's costly in terms of some of the things in terms of our bonding issues and when we are borrowing funds. It's no secret that one of the big issues about this budget is the governor's desire to lower the threshold on the millionaire's tax. And fortunately, the two other leaders in the legislature, the Senate President, Steve Sweeney, and the Assembly Speaker, Craig Coughlin, has said that they will not entertain that. So it's going to be a real interesting, as I say, as we come down. The Senate, I believe, is scheduled to meet later this week. Next week to start its process. And the legislature is responsible for delivering a budget to the governor for his or her approval, in this case, for Governor Murphy's approval. And the governor can line item veto, and that will be sent back to the legislature. And there has been considerable talk about there possibly being a line item veto, and this may be the first time that we may see a legislature override our governor's line item veto. So stay tuned. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting debate, and I've been asking my colleagues who I engage whether they believe that there will be a shutdown, and I'm thinking that we possibly will have a shutdown in the state. I'm hopeful that we won't, but given the conversation that's been taking place and the disconnect that we have between the administration, the governor, and the two leaders in the legislature, I think there is a great possibility for that. The other thing that's been sort of garnering steam in Trenton or conversation has been the tax incentive programs and the fact that they are scheduled to shut down on June 30th. And the thought of the legislature is looking to perhaps extend them. As you know, in the governor's address to the legislature, he really came out with some concerns about the incentive programs, how they were being managed, the fact that he thought there was money not being properly spent or credits that were being properly utilized, and therefore he's had a committee established to investigate the EDA, and then on the flip side, the Senate President and the Assembly Speaker have also set up a committee to look at that because they're concerned about New Jersey's economy. If we're not able to provide incentives or if these things aren't extended, then companies are not going to look to come to New Jersey. We're already tasked as being one of the highest states with one of the highest income taxes, and also ranked so far down in the food chain line, typically 48th, 49th, or 50th in terms of a place where businesses would want to come. So at the end of the day, it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks to see what happens and what unfolds and whether folks will come together. It's really an interesting situation given that we have a Democratic legislature and a Democratic administration, but that these individuals are so far apart on a lot of the issues out there. So stay tuned for what I think will be an interesting conversation and perhaps some midnight behind closed doors like we had last year when we thought we were going to shut down.
All right, thanks, Ralph. Sarah's immediate past president, I would appreciate if you give us a little bit of background on the NJCPA statement that we released on the budget.
Sure, absolutely. So as an organization, the NJCPA released a statement about the budget, commending the governor for addressing certain areas of healthcare spending, high property tax, and the growth of small businesses. We do feel as an organization that there is more that needs to be worked on. Obviously, we're opposed to the expansion of the millionaire's tax, and we did run a poll, some of you possibly participated, for our members to talk about how they felt the proposed budget would impact the state's economy over the long term. You can see the results up on your screen. Essentially, 70% felt that the economy will get marginally or significantly worse based on the proposed budget as it is now.
Thanks, Sarah. Ralph, any closing comments on the budget?
Well, I think, when the governor delivered his budget address, he made a statement that was quite interesting. He said, the budget that I'm presenting will most likely not be the budget that will be approved. So there's already a feeling or sense that, things are going to be cut, that he's probably going to, line item veto, because again, the legislature has to deliver the budget to the governor for approval. So I think that's going to be the big issue. Again, with what we find in terms of whether, there is going to be a shutdown. I think one good thing is that, again, legislators at this point, have been opposed to lowering the threshold from $5 million to $1 million, such that individuals who make over $1 million will be taxed at 10.75%. So that's a good thing, and so there's heavy support for that. Hopefully that will continue to be in place. And as we all know, the budget must be passed by June 30th. There has been some discussions in the legislature about asking for, quote, an extension. We'll see how that plays out. Particularly, one of the things that they focused in is trying to keep the parks open because, who wants the Jersey Shore to shut down? So, as I said, let's stay tuned to see what happens, and we'll be discussing this further on Friday morning with the roundtable that we have, where we have a member from the Assembly and also a member from the Senate. We have a Democrat and a Republican, so it should be an interesting discussion on what their feelings or sentiments are in terms of how the budget process is going.
Well, earlier Ralph alluded to the tax incentive programs. I'm going to ask Sarah to take us through that now.
Sure, absolutely. So as Ralph said, that the current tax incentives are set to expire on June 30th, just a few weeks away, and the governor has proposed shifting more of these incentives to small and startup companies and then capping the overall program at $400 million. Once again, we did a NJCPA member survey, which you can see up on the screen, and more than half said that the incentives should be for large companies and small to mid-sized companies, so straying away from the smaller and the startups. Also, more than 55% said that current programs are not effective in attracting companies and jobs to the state, and just about that same 55% felt that these current incentives were not effective in retaining companies and jobs in New Jersey, so not too good of a result. Current programs are under some intense scrutiny, as Ralph did say in his opening remarks. The governor did create a task force to investigate the administration of the tax incentive programs, and then to counter that, Senate President Sweeney created a committee that is looking into the governor's task force. So we'll see how that turns out. But in the latest episode of the IssuesWatch podcast, we had political analyst Ben Dworkin say a few things about this battle and whether any compromises might be reached in the future. So we do have a clip of that that we can play for you right now.
The political scientist in me has to offer this initial insight. There was this legendary German statesman, Otto von Bismarck, who reportedly told people that there were two things you never wanted to see being made: sausages and legislation, because seeing the process by which either of those things was made would make you sick. And right now, this fight over the EDA tax credits has slowed down because everyone is now suing each other. And there are questions, or at least allegations, of criminal activity, which makes this whole thing, puts it on a whole different level. But it's unclear to me, based on what is in the public record at least, whether the process was really criminal or whether it was just the ugly underbelly of how laws get written. And all of this affects the question about whether there's going to be a compromise, because it's hard to compromise when someone is calling you a criminal. My own view is that, yes, eventually there will be. But as we talked about with the budget, right now, with the deadlines looming in just a few weeks, it's hard to rewrite the state's tax incentive programs when clearly they need a lot of debate and discussion. So what would not surprise me is if we see an extension of the current programs for a few months while a compromise is worked out, while hearings are held, and while we have a much longer debate.
So there was a draft bill that came out on June 5th that did introduce 5 new programs to replace the expiring programs, but we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Sarah. Sure. So Kyle, let's talk about some of those new NJCPA polls.
Certainly. Thank you, Ellen. We love polls. So we've been talking about polls and survey results, and these polls are super important. And so the ask of you is to certainly consider, filling out surveys as they come out from the NJCPA. They're important to our legislators and our media. They listen to the results. It's our opportunity collectively as a membership to express our opinions and views. And another way to express opinions, NJCPA will be partnering with Fairleigh Dickinson University for a small business poll. So you may have seen an announcement or an email or other correspondence on this, but members can participate, and we're asking members to also think about inviting their small business clients to participate as well. It's not a heavy lift. The poll will take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to complete, and the poll will come out about once a quarter over the next year.
Kyle, if I could just add one thing. Our polls have been utilized by the Senate President and his team, and actually some of the things that the results of our polls have been used on the path of progress, which I'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that are happening there. So it's really important Our members are viewed as being, I often say to legislators, if you want to really know what's happening in New Jersey, who better to go to than the CPA Society? Because our members pretty much touch every constituency. So do take the opportunity to respond to the polls. Like Kyle said, they're short, but they're very powerful, and the information that we get and the results that we get are utilized by the legislature, and particularly the Senate President and his staff.
And that's right. And we were on Capitol Hill, just 2-3 weeks ago, and the legislators do know, and their ears perked up when we talked about the size of our membership and the reach that we have into the state of New Jersey, and especially into small business.
Right.
Yeah, they want to hear from us. Another way to have your voice heard is the NJCPA PAC, a very important tool and element of our society. The PAC works to protect our profession. It's helping to elect lawmakers who fight unfair legislation that would hurt our CPAs and the clients and the businesses that we as CPAs work for. And we also support legislation that benefits CPAs and the business community. And again, you can learn more about NJCPA PAC at the link here on the screen.
Okay, we're going to move on to the path of progress legislation, which Ralph will handle. But Ralph, a question came in that I think you might be able to tackle.
Okay.
When do you think Trenton will get serious on public employee pension reform?
Oh, good question. We've been asking that for over a year. I can honestly say I don't see it happening in the near term because, again, I think the big issue is that the governor believes that a promise his words are, a promise is a promise. And the reality of it is that New Jersey really can't afford to continue the pension plan as we know it today. And we have to do something, and that's why the Senate President has really stepped in and said, we cannot continue to kick the can down the road. And in the Path to Progress report, there are recommendations about what actions should be taken. And probably the biggest one is on the health care issue. And you're going from a platinum plan to a gold plan. But with the unions have been very vocal on this and have been challenging and stirring up their membership. And so as the Senate President has gone around to pitch the Path to Progress report, most of the people that show up at the town hall meetings are union workers. Yeah. And so it's going to be a real challenge. Yeah. But it is the elephant in the room that controls the future or destiny of New Jersey. Again, credit ratings and things of that nature. The credit rating agencies are looking for a solution on that, and we really have to get going on that. So that's going to be a big challenge. I think at the end of the day, just my opinion, it will probably be something that will go out on a ballot where a constitutional amendment.
I think we are getting some other questions in, but I think some of them may be answered in your Path to Progress report, so I think we'll move on to that.
Okay. Well, I spent 7 months on the task force, the working group that the Senate President put together to talk about how do we turn New Jersey around. And so in May, as a result, the Path to Progress report came out. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it's up on our website. I think it will be very insightful, and it touches on a couple of key areas: pension and benefit reform, education reform. With if those of you who may remember, we did a brochure on property taxes and how much of your property taxes go to education. I think the number was somewhere 52 to 53%, depending upon what municipality you lived in. That's going to be it's going to be a big challenge for us in that regard. So. In May, the Senate President, as a result of the Path to Progress report, dropped 27 bills are centered around the recommendations in the Path to Progress. And I was very happy to see this because so often these committees are put together and, a report comes out and nothing happens. And I really commend the Senate President because he has been committed to really trying to turn around New Jersey and get New Jersey back to where it has been, and the fact that we just can't kick the can down the road. His concern is that if we don't do anything, and particularly on the pension plan, that right now that represents about 16% of our state budget. By the year 2022, 2023, that number will grow to over 30% of the state budget. Wow. So when you look at that and you think about what happens if we get to that point, services are going to start to be cut. And so because the budget will be such a, and what really concerns me is that we will be possibly headed down a road to be the next Illinois, and with the situation that they have there. So again, the 4 categories that we're focused on were pension and benefit reform, education reform. As many of you know, one of the things that New Jersey is infamous for is having 650 school districts. And we have regional high schools, but K to 8 are not regionalized. And that's one of the big recommendations in the path to progress, is to think about going to a regional school system, which would hope not impact the quality of education, but make education delivery more effective and reduce costs. So that's going to be a big challenge because parents like to have supposedly walk their kids, to let their kids walk to elementary and middle school. It's funny because they end up driving their kids to elementary and middle school instead of allowing them to walk. But that's going to be probably one of the biggest debates because of the concern on what impact would that have on the quality of education. Because many reports rank New Jersey as number 1 in terms of K through 12 education and whatnot. And that's why we export a lot of kids out of New Jersey. Also, county and municipal government reform, shared services has been a big conversation. And so I think the Path to Progress report has, there's a recommendation in there about incentivizing municipalities to think about shared services and getting there. When you think about why should towns that are located next to each other both go out for bids on trash and sanitation services when they could do that and combine. There's also been the talk about consolidation of townships. That's not for everybody, but I know Princeton and Princeton Junction merged, and they've seen some benefits of that. So those are some of the other opportunities that we're looking at, that are being discussed and looked at. State and local tax structures also. So we have a bill in that we've been pushing, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the Allen Sobel bill, which is the pass-through bill, is something that we've gotten through both the Senate and the Assembly with no issues. And all of a sudden, at the 11th hour, the administration has weighed in with a bunch of amendments and changes to the bill that, in effect, make it a revenue raiser. And this bill would have helped significantly small businesses the way it was structured. So we're still fighting the battle on that, because our hope was that it would have gotten through before the whole budget process, but it may be delayed. But I'm saying, so I mean, the Path to Progress, I really, again, commend the Senate President for, taking the courage to step out of what is usually done in the legislature with everybody just voting along, lines and everything, to really take a deep dive in thinking about how we can turn New Jersey around. Earlier, I think it was earlier in 2018, we had the Senate President in over in East Brunswick to talk to our leadership and our members about, and he's truly committed to going about this. So that's the Path to Progress.
And I think members can learn more about the pension reform by listening to the Complete Issues Watch podcast with Ben Dworkin at njcpa.org/podcast. Thanks, Ralph. So no Issues Watch would be complete without Sarah providing an update on cannabis. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Now that my term's over, who are we going to assign this to?
I don't know.
Well, I think it could still stay with you, Sarah.
I'll just come back for a special guest appearance. All right, fair enough. So we did talk about this last year at the convention, and the updates, basically, the adult use legalization has stalled. Lawmakers now may be looking to put a referendum for the 2020 ballot in November to let the residents decide. There are more extensive plans to expand the medical marijuana and having that move forward. The state's looking to issue as many as 108 new permits to help meet that growing demand. The Assembly did have a vote scheduled for June 10th, but it's been postponed to an unspecified date. One of the components of legalizing adult use marijuana in New Jersey has to do with the vital impact of New Jersey decoupling from the IRS Code Section 280E. There's a clip that we're going to play for you from one of the upcoming IssuesWatch podcasts, where NJCPA member Melissa Dardani explains exactly why Section 280E was enacted and why New Jersey really does need to decouple from it.
What it says in plain context is that outside of your cost of goods sold, if you're operating an illicit business, you're completely barred from taking any of those business deductions. Operating expenses, so the cost of driving around, the cost of keeping your lights on, the cost of your payroll, the people that you have working for you, none of that is actually deductible under 280E. And it's very burdensome, so I'll give you a quick example. If I earn $100,000 of revenue selling cannabis plants and related products, let's say 30,000 of which is my cost of goods sold, which I'm allowed to take, it's a return of my capital, 50,000 of which are my operating expenses, giving us a net income of 20,000 for the year. We're actually, you would think in a normal scenario, right, you're going to get taxed on that $20,000. As a cannabis business, you're going to get taxed on $70,000, which is the $100,000 of income less the $30,000 of cost of goods sold. Where that becomes an obvious problem is that I spent $50,000 of cash out the door to run my business, and now you're telling me that I cannot take those deductions against my income. It's what someone has coined the term phantom income for tax purposes, because the cash is going out the door, but you're not getting any benefit for it, and it's an unfair penalty against these businesses. And even further, in every other circumstance when the tax code, when Congress is enacting, the various provisions of the tax code, one of the underlying issues that they look at is, does the taxpayer have the wherewithal to pay the tax? That's how they determine timing provisions and whether or not the tax is fair to be assessed against the taxpayer. In this particular instance, we have a legal state-regulated business that has no wherewithal to pay the tax, but is getting assessed the tax anyway. And it becomes a very, very big problem from a cash flow perspective, particularly in a cannabis business where the margins are so thin. It's so expensive from a compliance perspective and an operating perspective to be running these businesses, where it presents a real problem for those in the early stages of their business.
So we do have a comment that had come in. If legalizing marijuana goes to a public referendum and it passes as expected, although I'm not sure that's expected, won't the legislature still have to work out the regulatory details? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Without question.
Absolutely.
I think the issue is you have, by taking it to a referendum, which has been done in most of the states, I think with the exception of one, legislators are kind of taken off the hook, because if they vote on it, that could be some backlash because of the concern of, I think, the black market concern about on legalizing cannabis.
Yeah, thanks. So Kyle, as the father of 4 daughters, number one's going off to college in September. I know that the subject of student loan debt is near and dear to your heart. So why don't you give us an update on that?
I think I'm just going to go smoke some cannabis and
There you go.
mellow out for the next 10 years. It sounds like our members endorsed that approach. Yes, I do have 4 daughters. One graduates tomorrow morning, and one follows the year after. So I'm going to be a busy guy going back and forth between the convention and high school. So yeah, student loan debt, it's a big issue, big problem. I think some of you were probably here last night when Jim Glassman, the economist, was talking a bit about it in response to some of the Q&A, and I thought his point, while maybe I didn't agree with it 100%, was interesting, where he thought the cost of college education is actually supportable and even possibly sustainable. But I won't go into that because that is not my area of expertise, nor is cannabis, although I might try to make it an area of expertise. Anyhow.
I can mentor you there.
Perfect. So back on a recent AICPA survey. We love surveys. I seem to be the survey guy today. We found that 2/3 of young adult job seekers have student loan debt with an average balance of roughly $33,000. And millennials with loan debt, this is kind of interesting, based on the survey, want their employers to actually help them with their debt more than they would want them to help deal with other, say, remote work options or other benefits. So I thought that was pretty insightful. In New Jersey, we have 2 bills that were recently signed to help NJ class loan borrowers manage their debt and repair their credit scores, but more still needs to be done. We also have a new NJCPA task force that is working on legislation to help provide tax relief for student loan debt repayments. So I think that's a great and worthy effort on the part of our membership. Also, we'll be creating an educational campaign around student loan debt. NJCPA members have access to Credible, which is a comparison platform for student loan debt refinancing. And again, you can learn more at the link provided here on the screens, on the monitors.
Right. We did have a comment that come in. What can employers or state and federal governments do to help with student loan debt crisis? I know some of our firms are actually have programs. I'm not intimately aware, but you.
Yeah. One of the thoughts has been to, as an individual, an employee pays off a student loan, that a company would make a contribution to a 401k on their behalf equal to that amount or a certain threshold. So
yeah, that's the one I've heard mostly talked about.
Right, and I think there may be also something out there, and I'm trying to find Jeff Kazerman, that there may be some legislation to provide some incentives to employers in terms of helping their employees. Also, the other big concern is that, again, the affordability issue in New Jersey, that this could be entice individuals to stay in New Jersey by introducing some legislation that would provide a tax credit, I think is what it is, a tax credit on the state income tax as well.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to employment law update, as these issues really are key, especially if you own your own business or you're at all responsible for any of the HR functions in your firms or companies that you work in. And I'm going to ask Sarah, as a business owner, to take us through that.
Sure. None of these are new that we're going to talk about. Most of these we talked about at previous Issues Watches, but we do feel that they're important enough to bring up again and reiterate. Some of the deadlines and sort of benchmark dates are coming up. So we're going to start with the conversation on minimum wage, which effective July 1st is going to have the first increase to $10 an hour. Over time, it will increase $1 every January 1st through 2024 until it reaches the new $15 per hour. So there is a slower phase-in for small businesses, which are defined as less than 6 employees, seasonal workers, and agricultural workers. The paid sick leave, which we have talked about several Issues Watches as we were building up to this, was effective October 29th, 2018. So employees are accruing 1 hour of earned sick leave for every 30 hours worked, and that's capped at 40 hours per year. This does include part-time employees. There are some exemptions for per diem healthcare workers, construction workers, those who are employed within a collective bargaining agreement, and then certain public employees who already may have sick benefits in their packages. But again, these are important things that are in existence that have certain benchmark dates. As business owners of firms or companies, we need to know this, and then we also need to know this for our clients to pass that information along. Something that is a bit on the newer side is the anti-arbitration law that was signed by Governor Murphy. Essentially, this bans arbitration in all employment contracts within New Jersey. As an organization, the NJCPA was opposed to this bill because we felt that arbitration is a faster, fair, and really more effective way for parties to resolve complex disputes. And we did have several meetings with legislators, but ultimately it did pass. So the anti-arbitration law did go into effect.
And I'll talk a little bit about a couple other things. So many of you likely received the New Jersey Department of Labor alert. This alert deals with misclassification of employees. And the issue was around incorrectly classifying employees as independent contractors. So be sure to read that alert. The link is on the screen as to where we have that on our site. There's also the expansion of paid family leave that goes effective July 1, 2020. And that will double the amount of paid leave an eligible employee can take from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. And it increases the weekly benefit rate from 67% to 85%. And just a reminder on pay equity, that was effective on July 2nd, 2018. It creates some very significant burdens on employers of all sizes. And it's intended to ensure pay equity for any protected class that's performing substantially similar work. It's a very detailed piece of legislation, and again, we have a link to some more detail and information for you.
Thanks, Kyle and Sarah. Certainly a lot going on in the unemployment area. I'm going to turn it over to Ralph now for a very brief update on what's going on in New Jersey Accountancy Act.
Yes, there was legislation in to make a couple of changes. There were 6 changes that took place regarding the experience requirement that needed to happen. Previously, you had to get experience working essentially in public accounting, but now that's been open to the fact that you can get experience working industry and government as well, so long as you're working under the auspices of a CPA. Changes to firm registration. Firm mobility was a big thing, having the ability for firms to be able to not necessarily have a footprint here, but come into New Jersey and work without going through a process of registering here. Managing partners, as we've talked about over how our profession is changing. And so the previous regs required that the managing partner of a firm be a CPA. Now that has been expanded that the managing partner could be a non-CPA. However, there would have to be a CPA who had responsibility for all the attestation services that are required. Mobility of CPA credits. Many of you may be licensed in multiple states, and states being states, they all have different requirements. So what we've done with the mobility of CPE is to allow, for example, if you have a license in New York and New Jersey, and your original state is New York, New Jersey would be accepting of the New York CPE requirements to meet New Jersey's requirements. So I think a lot of changes that have been helpful. Also, there have been proposed changes to the regs. The regs underpin the statutes in New Jersey. So one of the things that's happening is nano-learning, where you have 10 and 12-minute increments. That's going to be incorporated in the proposed changes. Reduction of technical learning requirement from 72 to 60 credits per triennial. No credit getting for attending or teaching a course that qualifies to sit for the CPA exam. Adoption of, and the screen's really moving fast here, the 24-hour credit A&A requirement remains, even though in the statutes, it remains as part of the regs requirement. And we've been supportive of a lot of the changes. Hopefully, at the next State Board of Accountancy meeting, those will be approved, and we'll have that all taken care of and bagged and tagged.
Thanks, Ralph. So in the area of peer review, please remember thank you. Please remember, CPA firms claiming an exemption from peer review must file an affidavit with the New Jersey State Board of Accountancy by June 30th. And remember, the form must be filed every year. I know that's an issue, but that's the rule for now. We'll be talking a little bit more about New Jersey issues and business and economic roundtable on Friday morning. We're very honored to have panelist Senator Steve Oro, who happens to be a CPA, Assemblyman Roy Freeman, who is and political science professor and commentator Bridget Harrison, along with NJTV's Rhonda Schaefer. So that's scheduled to start breakfast is at 7:30 here, with the panel discussion starting at 8:30. If you are at home watching this, you should see on your screen the little link where you can register for that. Also, be aware our September-October issue of New Jersey CPA Magazine will focus more on New Jersey topics. So Your issue should come out around September 1st, so watch that. You have some insights from lawmakers, business leaders, political analysts on why businesses choose New Jersey, why they leave, how we can keep young people and retirees here, and recent tax changes and how they've affected our individual businesses. So a lot more to come. I'm going to toss it back to Ralph now to do a little bit more on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Yeah, as we all know, for 2018, the Tax and Jobs Cuts Act was implemented, and it really took, New Jerseyans took a big hit because of the cap on property taxes and salt taxes at $10,000. In our poll, we conducted a poll because the perception was that the Tax Reform Act was going to provide more money in people's paychecks, but also, for the most part, people walked away with the notion that they were going to get a larger refund as well. So we decided to take a poll with our members, and we found, on average, that 36% of New Jersey's CPA members' clients had higher tax liability, while 20% stayed the same and 44% had a lower tax liability. And this was based on their 2018 returns. 53% of members are counseled most or almost all of their clients to adjust their withholdings, but many clients didn't. So that caused a lot of people to get some surprises, if you will, when it came time to file their tax returns. So I think the feedback we got from our members in terms of this busy season was that it was one of the toughest ones that they've had, given the Tax Reform Act.
Thanks, Ralph. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now to talk a little bit about the NASBA AICPA proposed changes to CPE rigs.
Sure. Most of the proposed changes are administrative, and really the most significant of the proposed changes has to do with the concept and the adoption of this term called adaptive learning of self-study. I couldn't begin to try to explain to you what adaptive learning means, other than it uses computer algorithms essentially to determine your knowledge level, and then it adapts the learning accordingly and appropriately to your perceived level. That's about all I can tell you. So the comments on that are open until August 31st, and you can read more on the link on your screen momentarily about that particular proposal.
Thanks, Sarah. I think the link might be coming up soon. Since you're doing such a great job, Sarah, how about you take us through IRS updates?
Sure. So the wonderful PTIN fees might be returning. There was the appeal case that the court did hold that the IRS does have the authority to charge a fee. They have not yet come back and said whether or not they will be re-implementing the fee that was here and gone and now evidently can be here again. So stay tuned for that. But there is a new proposed bill out there that would give the IRS the authority to regulate income tax preparers. Nationally, the AICPA does support this bill, and you can read more on the link on your screen about that new proposed bill.
Thanks, Sarah.
Sure.
Now I'm going to turn over to Kyle to talk a little bit about advisory services.
Yeah, so advisory services have expanded tremendously. What we found is that advisory services on average have risen 189% nationwide in 8 years, primarily due to client demand. And in that same period of time, tax services have grown about 67%, and audit and accounting services grew at around 37%, again, over an 8-year period. So to help New Jersey firms looking to expand their services, especially in the advisory space, the next issue of the NJCPA magazine is going to focus on that topic. So watch your mail for the July 1 issuance, or you can also read it online on njcpa.org.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yep.
So the NJCPA has a new vision. So what's that all about? Well, it's ultimately the result of a great deal of member input and feedback, member surveys, dozens of meetings with members, their firms, and their companies, and 18 months of discussion with our Strategic Planning Committee and Board of Trustees. An incredible dialogue enabled us to better understand our members' needs, challenges, and opportunities. And from this, together, we formed a new vision to take us to the future. We'd like to share that with you now. So please go to the video monitor.
The NJCPA has a rich history of member service, cultivating community and helping to foster the next generation of accountants and CPAs.
The society is at a crossroads today. There is changing demographics in terms of who's becoming a CPA, whether people are actually advancing to CPA licensure status or staying as accountants.
There's so many things that are changing within our organization, so many different generations in the workplace, so many different generations that are our members.
Disruption is ever present in the industry, and our ability to embrace it and manage that change is what will make the society different.
Technology is forcing us to move at a pace that maybe many aren't comfortable with. The future is just changing so rapidly. How are our careers going to be impacted by the changing technology? How do we best serve our members? Because we have members at each end of the generational spectrum.
How can we further propel the value of our membership, or further propel the mission of what it is that's important to NJCPA?
All of these different dynamic shifts are forcing the society to think about themselves differently.
Why shouldn't we have one guiding big idea that can take us into the future as an organization together?
We had to ask ourselves, how do we become more nimble and responsive to the needs of a changing market while still fulfilling our mission? It begins with a bold organizational vision.
To equip and empower.
To equip and empower.
To equip and empower.
To equip and empower New Jersey's accounting and finance professionals to thrive in their careers.
The vision allows us to think longer term, make investments, make strategic decisions today to get ahead of the changing curves, and allows us to plan for the future so that the society can be as thriving and as value add as it is today.
To equip and empower means to provide resources, guidance, to strengthen the knowledge base that you already have, but also a connection to others to help you grow, either individually or in your career, help you grow your business.
Equip and empower is making certain that our members have the tools and the capabilities, as well as the platform to be the best that they can be.
The hope is that we're irreplaceable. We're a part of their lives. The society is embedded in the way they think about what they do on a day-to-day basis. Today's member needs all sorts of assistance, help to thrive, to be successful, and is taking today's CPA and giving them something that elevates who they are, elevates their brand, elevates their ability to be successful.
Thrive is pushing them to a level of success that they may never have thought possible with the help of the NJCPA.
I like to think of that vision statement as really a two-way street between the organization and its membership.
As you embrace what the new vision is and as you take it to be your own, help us as an organization understand how our decisions and our choices either support and align with this new vision, or in some cases they may not, and we need all leaders and members to help us be accountable.
Future society is irreplaceable and has really an unlocked value that otherwise we may not be unlocking today.
It really is intended to be a way to just more holistically kind of guide and direct us as we look to the future within the state of New Jersey, within our membership, and within our profession as a whole.
It's a great futuristic vision to have as an organization, and the NJCPA is a great organization to support us in thriving in our careers.
Excellent. We hope that you guys are as excited about our vision as we are. A significant amount of time, effort, and diligence went in to the development of the vision on the part of many of our members. It was not something that was done in an isolated fashion or inside the four walls of a closet. It was a very collaborative and engaging exercise. And some of the words that really jumped out to me as I listened to the video, one is change. We're experiencing unprecedented change within our society meaning as a whole, right, around the country. Likewise, demographics and changes in shifting demographics, disruption, thinking about ways that we can best serve our membership and promote the CPA and promote our brand. Terms like guide and direct, being nimble, being responsive, and taking bold steps. Those were all things that we've considered, discussed, and really debated as a group as we tried to pull together something that we thought would be really representative of our organization, that would be aspirational, and that would inspire all of us collectively as members. Any other thoughts that you guys want to share?
I think, we tried to represent as best as we could the current CPA and their profession, but really we wanted to be able to look to the future as best as we could and recognize what that CPA in the future is going to look like and what he or she's organization is going to look like into the future, and have this sort of umbrella, big, bold vision that can guide us in the future, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, to be this ever-evolving organization that continues to change and become what its members need it to be, whatever that might be.
From my perspective, I think what's most exciting about the vision statement is that its success depends on the power of this community, our members. We tout that CPAs are trusted advisors. I think this vision statement leads us in that direction to be the trusted advisors to clients or to the employers, that those in business and industry that we work for. So we're excited about.
And that was terminology we had debated using, was to be a trusted advisor. I know that was on the table,
right.
Quite a lot.
I think that's the expectation going forward. I refer back to conversations we've had at AICPA Council with the CEO Barry Melanson, who said 5 years from now you'll look back and this profession will be totally different. And I think that vision statement pushes us in that direction to be part of the change that's going to be taking place and that needs to take place.
Well, thank you all.
Agreed.
So we invite you all to think about the vision, about what it means to equip and empower you in order that you will thrive in your careers. Help us to understand your needs and the needs of your colleagues so that we can all together take the next best steps. So this concludes today's Issues Watch. We thank those who have signed in virtually. Again, we will be replaying Issues Watch on June 18th at 12 and June 20th at 2 p.m. And remember to join us this Friday at 8:30 a.m. for our Issues Watch Business and Economic Roundtable, and that session will also be replayed twice. In the meantime, check njcpa.org, NJCPA Pulse, open forum for any updates on the topics we discussed today and more. And remember to follow each one of us on Twitter. We'll look forward to seeing you in future sessions today. Thank you again.
Thank you.